So, Mitch, you and I have been doing this for a little while, and we have amassed thousands and thousands and thousands of conversations with homeowners that live in an HOA. What are some of the things that you've picked up on of that kind of outline? Essentially, what's the perspective of a homeowner that lives in an HOA? What are you hearing from them? What are they frustrated about? What are the common things that you find them to be extremely confused about?
Just the disconnect of, I think, what their expectations are of the HOA versus the reality of what the HOA actually is responsible for versus what the homeowner is responsible for. I think there's a huge disconnect in that space specifically when you're talking about maintenance. Some of the other stuff isn't as much of a hot button, I feel like, for homeowners. I think the maintenance side is probably what I would say I hear the most of.
What would you say if you could depict, obviously this isn't everyone, but a good percentage of new homeowners that live in an HOA, what perspective do they have that's inaccurate when they think about living in an HOA, or what this is really going to be like?
That the stuff on their property isn't really theirs, right? Like a tree or a sidewalk or their driveway, their garage door. Every community has their specific set of guidelines. Think of a townhome. They're going to decorate the tree, or they're going to put stuff outside during holidays, which could be fine. Had a situation where, a homeowner screwed a flagpole holder right to the side of their trim work on the side of the house in a townhome building. They were frustrated that we asked them to remove that because their response was, "That's my house." Fair for you to think that, and I'm not saying it's not your house, but the siding doesn't really belong to you, And I think that's where the disconnect truly is. What is it that I actually own and am responsible for? And what is it that the HOA owns and responsible for? But here's, I think, the catch, right? The catch is this whole limited common element thing. Although the HOA might be responsible for it, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to pay for it. And that's where the confusion or frustration really comes into play. Because the HOA at the end of the day is responsible for aesthetics, appearance, maintaining it to be uniform. And if it's being, neglected, the HOA can now step in, fix that, send the bill to the homeowner.
So for somebody that doesn't know that term, limited common element, how would you explain that to somebody that's like, I've never heard that term, I don't know that phrase? Because everybody, more or less, probably in an HOA most of them have some form of what would be determined to be a limited common element. So what is a limited common element?
We're not attorneys, so in layman's terms, it's probably best understood as something that serves one unit, right? A good example would be like a deck off the back of a townhome, where the association might be responsible for these decks, but it only serves that one unit. In the association's mind, it's not fair for the person that's 3 or 4 houses down to maintain your deck. When they buy, oh great, the HOA is going to pay for my deck when it's come time to be done. And the HOA might, right? If you have a deck project and the HOA is going to replace all the decks in the community, fantastic. But if yours is falling apart, everyone else's looks good, the HOA technically could then say, okay, Daniel, you need to replace this deck. If you don't, we will do it for you and send you the bill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think when a homeowner submits their dues payment, they feel like they should get something directly in return. That's kind of the emotional side of it. But when you peel back the layers, an association's pool of funds needs to be used and expensed fairly. So if you have 40 units within an HOA and those funds are being put into an account, those funds are only supposed to be tapped into, and it affects every unit.
Right.
And I think that's the disconnect with those limited common elements is my railing to my front porch, or my garage door is in disrepair. It's clearly the HOA's responsibility, but it only affects me. I'm the only one with an issue. Those items need to be billed back to the homeowner, which is it never bodes well to the homeowner who's affected. That's what's hard for them. I pay HOA dues. I should have my limited common elements. I don't care about your terminology. It's like you said, it's this disconnect. It's their property. It affects them. Why should they have to be billed separately for it? But the reality is, like you said, there's other units within the community that are not impacted by it. And your neighbor shouldn't be paying towards your railing that you're the only one benefiting from.
Right. And I think defining the term or defining the terminology of what does it mean responsibility, right? Responsibility to maintain is different than responsibility to pay for.
Correct.
And that's probably where a lot of these tough conversations or a lot of these frustrations come from homeowners.
Mm-hmm.
They don't feel like they should have to, they're already paying, to your point, HOA dues that should be going to this.
Mm-hmm.
But now all of a sudden I'm getting a bill for a railing or a garage door or something.
Mm-hmm. Routine expenses, master policy insurance for the HOA, just simply paying the bills. Homeowners are not necessarily always aware that their monthly association dues isn't put in a piggy bank for them to cash in for some large improvement to their property. In large part, their association dues, the vast majority, if on a pie graph, what your dues are going towards, a lot of them is going to day-to-day expenses. The lawn, perhaps snow vendor, master insurance policy, and some of the things that the HOA is responsible for. A small percentage of that, though, however, is being tucked away to their reserve account. But I think a homeowner thinks I'm piling up my HOA dues like some type of CD or investment. And all of that money is tucked away in some bank account. And if you don't really understand your association's financials and you don't really understand what the association is responsible for, what are those routine common expenses, then you can get really defensive really fast because you're paying for something that you don't tangibly see the value in. There's nothing is sexy about paying a master insurance policy for something to go completely awry in the future. Oh, and by the way, that master policy insurance works in such a way where if somebody does do something negligent within the community or some horrific thing happens to the unit, that still results in that homeowner getting billed back for the deductible and the mess of dealing with their HO6 policy agent and all those types of things.
Yeah. Let's flip the script a little bit. Let's talk about the boards. So homeowners, I think, oftentimes feel a couple different things. They don't want to feel like they live in a prison, right? You're talking about compliance and violation issues and stuff like that. And we talk about boards very, very highly. They're volunteers. They do, overwhelmingly, for the most part, a great job, right? They're stewards of the community, doing the best that they can with the knowledge that they have. So we've praised board members time and time again, and we'll continue to do so. But let's play devil's advocate here. So that homeowner that feels like they're stacking up their HOA dues and they truly feel, which also could be justified, that they're not getting anything for their money. Some of the intangibles are, a management fee, insurance policy, reserve contribution. You're never going to see the rewards of that physically, truly. But it is also the responsibility of the board. If they're not doing a good job about maintaining the community, right? If homeowners aren't seeing repairs being done or vendors doing a good job for, landscaping and lawn maintenance and trim work, and you can drive through the community and notice a difference. That could be cause for a homeowner to be frustrated.
And I think a lot of times a frustrated homeowner who is looking at maybe an isolated incident. And we see so many complaints centered around landscaping and snow removal. It's obviously many HOAs that don't have to deal with snow removal, but when a big snowstorm comes, homeowners get really impatient about when they're going to come and clear, even though the contract with the vendor might specifically state that they have a certain window to clear it. Homeowners don't think that way. So they don't have an understanding of what the contract states. The vendor looks negligent. But in reality, they're completely within their contract. On the landscaping side, it can be really, really frustrating because, as you know, the builder comes in, plants a bunch of shrubs and trees, maybe not methodically thinking about the location or the species of the plant that they're installing. Some homeowners get sun, some don't. You get a tree right outside your home that you're the only one really that looks at it and appreciates it. It feels like your tree. It's right outside your property, but it's starting to die. And now you're pleading with the board to replace it. And the reality is the board has to make a decision of whether we have the funds for it, which can make the board look like the enemy. And the homeowner just wants a new tree because it's dying. And the second that they see another tree getting planted in the community, they get frustrated. Well, why did Susan get a new tree? I wanted a new tree. And it turns into this thing where a relationship between the board and the homeowner kind of feels like Santa Claus or a parent that's withholding gifts to their child. And the reality is it's just more complex than that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, a board member can come onto the board. They were previously a frustrated homeowner wanting change. But unfortunately, sometimes people get on the board and they have selfish intentions. They just want to get on the board to improve their property because the prior board clearly didn't. And that's really a pause moment. A good board member, you should definitely demonstrate integrity. I think you need to be fair to your community. You can't pick favorites. A good board member thinks about the entire community as a whole. And when a homeowner feels like there's favoritism and there's more social dynamics, like, hey, I don't really like that homeowner, so why should I even prioritize their wish list items? That can be really, really frustrating. So a board member really needs to be unbiased in their financial decisions. And when homeowners feel that way, they get really frustrated. Yeah. And a lot of times, I think just in general, homeowners feel really uninformed. They made this big, expensive investment to purchase their home in an HOA, and they're not directly part of the solution.
They're not decision makers.
No.
So that would be hard.
Yeah.
That's a harsh reality to live in of, you care about your property, but you can't necessarily always decide what's going to happen with that property.
Right.
The other thing on why I think homeowners feel frustrated, and sometimes justifiably so, again, homeowners feel like they live in a box. They live in a prison. They're not allowed to do anything. And so, when you follow the rules and regulations to the letter of the law, like down to the period, we have communities, we've worked with communities, we've heard stories about communities that are all like that. And that too causes frustration for homeowners. Trash cans, for example, the rules might say that, they're not you can't be visible from the street. So they put it on the side of their house behind a bush. And there's just like a 4 or 5 inch, little small sliver of the top of the trash can that you can in fact see from a street. And then they're going to get a violation notice and perhaps a fine if they don't stick their stinky trash can inside of their garage. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's frustrating for homeowners too. When you kind of, as a board member or a property manager, nitpick to that degree, that's a really good way to start conflict and start butting heads with the people that are, running the association.
Yeah, well put. I would say 95+% of people that get a violation letter, it feels totally unjustified. And they feel like it's Big Brother. I thought I could just live in my home. Like, don't you have better things to do than to send me a violation letter? But to flip the script again back onto the board, I know of communities close to my home that aren't in an HOA, and someone erected a big metal statue in their front yard, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. And so that's a very dramatic example, but living in an HOA, to go back to what you were saying, people move into an HOA for aesthetics. They want it to look consistent. It's all everyone's collective property value.
HOAs get a really bad rap. I can see why, but I can also see the benefits to it. So it's very much a two-sided coin. You've been to my house how many times? When you go 200 feet up the road, there is a beautiful home that recently got painted what color? Purple. It's like hot purple, bright pink. Why would you do that? Right? Like, what's the purpose? That's where it's like, that would never happen in an HOA. Every time we go for a walk with the boys, it's a massive eyesore. Constantly just staring at you, yelling at you every time you go down the road.
I think homeowners that live in an HOA should stop and think about what would happen if the board just chose to sit on their hands and that there was no governance. So when a builder builds an HOA, they have an attorney draft governing documents. A lot of times, a new homeowner that lives in an HOA has not a whole lot of understanding of what those documents say. And what ends up happening is they go into that relationship thinking it's just paperwork. But the reality is there are specific items in there that have legal ramifications if you choose not to abide by them or follow them. But a board that just chooses to not adhere to those rules and regulations, for a homeowner that's really frustrated that the HOA oversteps in their governance of the aesthetic consistency in the community, just stop and think about what would happen to a townhome community or a single family home community where someone could paint their house neon yellow and neon purple and neon green. They can have cars sitting out on their driveway that are falling apart and can't run. They've got garbage cans sitting out. Weeds are growing. They've got a piece of their siding falling off. They're putting yard signs all over their house. You can start to quickly envision this property getting completely out of control. And no one collectively, the majority, is not going to agree to that.
Everyone listening to this right now can probably think of a time in a current home or a past home that they've lived in, or a friend that they've gone over to, family member, whatever. I bet everyone that's listening to this or will listen to this can think of a property that they have frequently been around, whether it's literally your next door neighbor, someone on your way home from work, whatever. It's almost like you try to avoid going down that road because you don't want to look at their property. That's one of the benefits of what an HOA provides, is that consistency. If a board completely sits on their hands, not good. But there's a balance, right? There has to be some sort of balance between the governing documents and, communal living. There's some sort of cohesiveness that has to exist in order for this to work well. Homeowners get frustrated about documents. You're part of a membership. You've joined a new club, essentially. So if you'd go join a golf course club, they have rules. Some have some more strict rules than others. You have to wear this type of, collared shirt, and you have to spend this much money each month at the pro shop, and you have to eat dinner here once. You know what I mean? Like there's rules to being a member of this club. Same thing goes, right? There are things that you have to abide by when you live in a community like this. Simple as that. Now, is everyone going to do that perfectly? No. That's why there's oversight. But again, Big Brother doesn't always have to be, I think, ruled with such an iron fist. And I think that's where boards go wrong.
I think homeowners sometimes think the board's getting paid for this. And I would say 99.9% of governing documents that I've seen specifically state the board can't get compensated for being on the board. So there's that. So, and the other side of it is when a homeowner gets a notification towards the end of the year, typically, that their dues are increasing, the immediate reaction is frustration. Because again, if they have a thought in their mind that the HOA is not doing anything for me, or why are we even an HOA to begin with? We have no amenities. We only have a monument sign. What could we possibly be paying for? But it's not the board's decision to be a board or to be an HOA. That was way established before. We've talked about the frustrations that homeowners have when they find out that dues are increasing. The paradigm shift, when you're educated a little bit on what things cost and what's down the pipe that needs to be replaced, it's really, really important for homeowners to be actually, in a roundabout way, excited that dues are increasing because they know that the board's taking this job seriously. And what they're trying to do is increase dues every single year so that they can avoid a special assessment. And that's a huge issue. When a special assessment is determined by the board, it's usually because they don't have enough funds to be able to handle what has come their way. They've deferred from increasing dues for a long time, and it's caught up with them.
You don't want to be in the camp of boards, you're extremely healthy financially on paper, but your property's falling apart because you're also scared to spend money. So I would ask that homeowners, although you may be frustrated, get the information before you get worked up. Go to the board meeting, go to the annual meeting, respectfully, professionally ask the right questions before just lighting them on fire and saying that they suck at their job.
Right.
Because that's not going to get anybody anywhere.
No.
So, dues go up $50 a month next year. And you're wondering why. That's an extra $600 a year I'm paying into this HOA. What am I going to get for this? Well, go in and ask the questions. Are the vendors are they doing a good job, or is the board sick of having to babysit a lawn vendor because they're never there on time, or they don't do a good job? Their fall cleanup is a mess. So then now they've decided to hire a different, better, more qualified or higher level vendor so that the homeowners don't complain about how the grass is being mowed or how fall cleanup is going. So just do your own due diligence as well before you get all hot and bothered about, your increase in fee, or is the board really doing a good job? The best thing, we've talked about this as well, is to offer help. If you're a homeowner, you don't necessarily have to be on the board to help your community. Hey, I know, that you guys are busy. You've got a lot going on. I'm more than happy to call 3 or 4 vendors and try to get you some extra proposals. Like, be part of the solution, not be part of the problem. Because if you're constantly, nagging the board or frustrated and upset and coming to them with nothing but issues with no solutions, their willingness to help you is just going to get lower and lower and lower. They're just going to start to get annoyed, which I think would be fair.
The vast majority of homeowners that are angry will most likely not be angry after they've served time on the board.
Yep.
There is a transformation, if you will, of a homeowner who's angry, doesn't have answers, very confused, and is sort of fed up.
It's like getting baptized.
Yeah. If that homeowner ends up on the other side of the table and serves on the board, big pet peeve of mine is a homeowner who's angry consistently. And when I say to them, have you ever served on the board? Because they have no problem sharing with me all the things they hate about their HOA and how much the board isn't doing anything and they're not competent. To that angry homeowner, my question always is, have you served on the board? And if their answer is no, and it's common that they say no, then I know for a fact that nothing's going to change. And they need to know the financials. They need to understand what makes their HOA run. And until they and be the recipient of angry homeowners, because it's not fun. Being on a board, volunteering your time, thinking about it on the weekends when you'd rather just be enjoying your community, knowing which homeowners are past due and which aren't, which ones are in violation and which aren't, that messes with your ability to enjoy your community. And it's a sacrifice being on the board. It just simply is. It's not to say every board's awesome and every board's doing everything they should be doing, but the vast majority are, or at least are trying. So you're not going to get any points with me if all you have to say is negative things about your HOA, but you have never once decided to volunteer. The only difference between a board member and a homeowner is a lack of pride, wanting to be a part of the solution, serve. It's not fun, but it's necessary. And it makes you a better neighbor on the back end and a better person in the community because you're more sympathetic to the board and what they've been through.
Yeah. It doesn't always have to be a bad thing too, right? I mean, people serve on the board because they may enjoy it. They might be really good at it. Maybe they've developed some really fantastic friendships over the years on the board of directors. That happens every day. So it's not all bad. So homeowners have some patience, try to gain some understanding about what's really happening behind the scenes before you blow your top. I think at the end of the day is really what we're trying to say. Board members, on the other hand, there are fantastic boards. We work with them every day. There are also boards that hold a lot of pride and hold potentially grudges and nitpick throughout the community when they shouldn't. So it's definitely a two-way street.
Absolutely. So being on a committee, like you had mentioned, a lot of HOAs don't utilize the concept of a committee. I think maybe for board members or homeowners that don't really understand what that is, it's just a way to get involved without being on the board. There's typically one board member at least that's sort of overseeing that committee. That committee can't ultimately make decisions, but it's a way to involve more people. So if you find somebody that's consistently bringing up the landscape and they've got concerns and they've got ideas, the board is best off asking that homeowner, why don't you be on a committee? Can you research that? It sounds like you have a real big passion for landscape. We could really need some insight. We're dealing with some other things. I'd love for you to spearhead that. They get involved. They go out, take a look. You had said, getting bids, doing some research, and then they can bring that back to the board. And now the board has a lot to think about, figure out what landscape projects they want to pursue. So I think being on a committee is huge. Serving on the board, if you haven't already, like you said, do some research, attend your board meetings, make your piece in the homeowner forum respectfully. Those are all key things, I think, to kind of clearing the air on what's confusing and frustrating about living in an HOA.
And I don't think we're asking you to, as a homeowner, to get buried in your governing documents and memorize them. But I would say a wise homeowner would at least read them, kind of understand the main points of do's and don'ts of what it's really like to be included in this membership that you bought into, that you're now a part of. So you don't have to go crazy about it, but I think at the end of the day, familiarize yourself a little bit, at least, with what the documents actually say. Why do homeowners get frustrated? There's a lot of reasons for homeowners to be frustrated.
None of us really love the feeling of being out of control. And I think it can become really difficult when you went into a purchase in an HOA, but you did not know how the HOA works, who's responsible for what, the proper insurance coverage that you need to have as a homeowner. But I think the big thing is homeowners are best off when someone says the association, it's kind of them versus us. And the reality is every homeowner is the association. That's kind of the irony of it all. You are the HOA. If you're a frustrated homeowner, I understand. There's a lot of things that can go upside down, especially over time when you've got board members coming and going. Completely understand and am sympathetic to a situation where you didn't have the proper coverage and there was a loss assessment and you weren't covered. That's very unfortunate. There are situations where you have had past boards who did not increase dues, and as a result, you got a letter in the mail that $5,000 or something large amount is now due because they're trying to catch up because they don't have enough money. I understand the feeling of being unheard, that you've voiced your concerns at a board meeting and you felt like those comments weren't received, feeling like your other neighbors are getting things done at their property, but yours has been neglected for a certain amount of time. It's really important, I think, that homeowners have some sense of graciousness to the board that are doing the best that they can. It's not easy to run an HOA. It's not easy to make financial decisions that have implications both to the board members as well. I think people need to know that when a board member increases dues, it affects them too. It's not just something that's personal. It's a personal attack. But looking at a budget and understanding where funds are going on the budget can really help ease the tension a little bit. Because I think a lot of people feel like they're in the dark. They start conjuring up these scenarios in their mind that aren't necessarily always true. And so there's nothing like a mic drop moment. Then you take a look at the budget and be like, oh, got it. So we have to have a master insurance policy. Maybe you need to ask why. Well, if big tornado rips through our community, we got somebody that's going to build it back up. Got it. Okay. Oh, if somebody turns their furnace off during the winter and it freezes all the pipes and affects the unit to the left and the right of them, we need to have a master policy insurance to kind of dig ourselves out of that mess. Oh, got it. So a master insurance policy is needed. Okay. A lawn vendor, what did they do? Well, the common area is actually a lot more expansive than you realize. You're only looking at the small portion of property right outside your home, but the property's huge and we need to have a lawn vendor that's reliable. And by the way, context, if you're not happy with them, we've gone through 2 or 3 in the last, 3 or 4 years, and this is the best one we've ever had. Everybody wants to try to find somebody to blame. The board took a risk with that vendor. It might not have paid out. Board member chose to move forward with an insurance policy. Maybe the insurance carrier drops them out of the blue. You're always taking risks with your vendors. Homeowners need to understand they're doing their best to try to make calculated decisions for the best of the community. It's just not easy. Homeowners need to know that. And while you're walking your dog, your board president might be sitting at his kitchen table with a HOA budget in front of him, not getting paid for it. So it's just good to have context that,
Yep.
there's a lot of things happening behind the surface that a lot of homeowners don't really understand.